Namaskar. Welcome to my class once again. Today we shall discuss 6 papers on wit by Joseph Addison. This is essay number 3 that he writes. In the first two essays, the writer talks about the different kinds of writing which he classifies as false wit. He considers them examples of false wit. In this essay, he does the same thing. He considers a few other things as examples of false wit. So let us find out what he says are examples of false wit. Let us read the text. Several kinds of false wit that vanished in the refined ages of the world discovered themselves again in the times of monkish ignorance. Monkish ignorance. What does he mean by that? So by monkish ignorance, he refers to the period when the monks played a very significant role in the shaping of the society. When did the monks play a significant role? In the medieval period. In the medieval period that spanned between 1066 AD and 1485 AD, these monks played a very important role. What was their primary objective? Who these monks were? The monks were members of a religious community, and their primary role was to get closer to God through their physical sacrifices and religious studies. So, spread of education, spread of religion was one of their most important objectives. In addition to this, what else they did? They provided education to the young people and they also wrote books. So their books are the chief sources that provide us adequate information about the medieval period. Now these monks were masters of whatever little education that was extant at that time, whatever little education was available. Education had still not reached the common masses. Only a few monks were educated. Monks were not allowed to carry out any business. So what would they do? So obviously, if some of the monks wanted to show that they were better or superior to others, they would write some books. It is no wonder that several of them who wanted genius of higher performance employed many hours in the composition of such tricks in writing, as required much time and little capacity. So most of these people, what did they do? They employed such tricks. They used such tricks which required much time but little ability, which wanted or which needed, they wanted to introduce some, that was there. These things were there. Greeks, among the Romans, these things were prevailing. These things had prevailed years ago. They simply revived those things in England. So the writer gives example of a person who has seen how the Aeneid turned into Latin rhymes by one of the most educated people of the time. So what is Aeneid? Aeneid is a Latin epic poem. It was written in Latin between 29 and 19 BC by Virgil. So this Beaux spirit means a witty person. What did this witty person do? He said that if Aeneid was translated or transformed or was rewritten in the form of rhymes, then it could be the most perfect work in its kind. So Aeneid has a lot of acceptance. It was accepted by people. So he simply wasted his time by converting that into Latin rhymes. So he gives another example. I have likewise seen a hymn in hexameters to Virgin Mary. So hymn is a song of praise written to praise God. This is a religious song written in praise of God. So another, you know, witty person wrote a hymn in hexameters having 6 feet. It was dedicated to Virgin Mary and only 8 words and its combinations of 8 words, different combinations of 8 words produced an entire book. Okay, so this is what he, and what is the meaning of the 8 words? Thou hast as many virtues, O Virgin, as there are stars in heaven. This is the meaning of those 8 words. So he made various combinations of these 8 words and produced an entire book on that. So during this period, it is to this age that we owe the production of anagrams. Anagram is another example of falsehood. What is this anagram? Anagram is nothing but a transmutation of one word into another. Transmutation means the action of changing from one form to another form. For example, you you tell me, sir, give an example of anagram. TEA. TEA is T. So I think a little. I use the same letters but produce a different word. EAT, it. Similarly, I will give you another example. Secure. SECURE. Using these 6 letters, I produce another word. Rescue. RESCUE. This is an example of anagram. So, the writer says, what is anagram? This is but a transmutation of one word into another, or the turning of the same set of letters into different words. So you change the position of letters, same letters with which you have formed another word. You change the position of the letters and you form a different word. So I remember a witty author, in allusion to this kind of writing, calls his rival who was distorted and had his limbs set in places that did not properly belong to them, an anagram of a man. So this is not very important. What is important is anagram. Anagram is another example of falsehood. What is anagram? It is a transmutation of letters of words, transmutation of letters or words, one word into another. The letters of the words are rearranged in such a way that they produce another word. So this is called anagram. An anagram is an example of falsehood. Now, next is, the writer gives an account of a person who was writing an anagram and how he found himself in serious trouble. I have heard of a gentleman who, when this kind of wheat was in fashion, endeavored to gain his mistress's heart. He wanted to impress his mistress. So what was the name of the mistress? The name of the mistress was Lady Mary Boon. So the lover, not being able to make anything of Mary by certain liberties, indulged to the kind of writing and converted into Moll, Moll. So her name became Lady Moll Boon, and he worked for a very long time. Worked for, you thought a lot, indulged in serious thought upon the and he produced an anagram. Upon presenting it to his mistress, who was a little vexed in her heart to see herself degraded into Mole Boon. So he took this to his mistress and showed, this is the anagram that I have produced out of your name. So Mrs. Wife became very angry. What is this? My name is Lady Mary Boon, and you have made it Mole Boon. And she told him, my dear husband, my name is not Boon. My title is not Boon. My title is Bohun, Bohun. You know, what was the result of that? The lover was thunderstruck with his misfortune, in so much that in a little time after he lost his senses. So he had worked so hard for more than 1.5 years and produced an anagram, but that was not accepted by the wife. So the next example of false suite is the acrostic, Acrostic. The acrostic was probably invented about the same time with the anagram, though it is impossible to decide whether the inventor of the one or the other were the greater blockhead. Blockhead is a fool, a foolish person. So whether the writer says acrostic was invented exactly at the same time, almost at the same time when anagrams were produced, anagrams were invented. But whether the author of the anagram is a foolish person or the author of the acrostic is a more foolish person, that I can't say. Right? What is an acrostic? The simple acrostic is nothing but the name or title of a person or thing made out of the initial letters of several verses, and by that means written after the manner of the Chinese in a perpendicular line. Usually what happens when we write something, we write from left to right in a horizontal manner. But Chinese, if you have seen the way the Chinese people write, they write it in a perpendicular way from top to bottom. Now, I will give you an example of acrostic. What is an acrostic? It is nothing but the title of a person, name or title of a person after the manner of the Chinese, and it is made out of the initial letters of several verses. I will give an example. First line is faithful person, second line is right guideline, third line is innocent, fourth one is energetic, fifth one is nice and naughty, sixth one is there for everything. So if you write one line below another, right? And if you take the first letters of all these into consideration, it becomes FRIEND, friend. Okay, so this is the example of an acrostic. The writer says, uh, this is one way of arranging things. You can arrange words in the beginning, you can arrange words at the end also. And the writer says, just as a cricket ball has a seam in the middle from where the bowler holds it. Seam, there is a seam. जो मैंने क्रिकेट खेलुछ से जानथिबो स्विंग बॉलिंग करिया फेले सीम रु धरिबा पड़े फास्ट बॉलर माने सीम रु धरतांती बॉल टाको तो बेले बेले कोन हुए सेटा मझिरे भी थाई पारे मझिरु से लाइन रो मझिरु गोटे वर्ड सब लाइन रो मझि 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 वर्ड टाको नेले मध्य यू कैन फॉर्म ए वर्ड तेणु एथिरे कोन होची ना फर्स्ट लेटर गुडा को नेकी गोटे वर्ड फॉर्म करि होची यू हैव 5 or 6 you have a poem 5 or 6 lines are there you take the first letters of each line and you form a word just as I formed the word friend. So this is an example of acrostic, and this is another example of false suite. I have seen some of them where the verses have been not only been aged by a name at each extremity. What is the meaning of that? These words have been written either at the front position, at the beginning, or at the end to form a different word, but have had the same name running down like a seam through the middle of the poem. So just as you have a seam in the middle of the ball, similarly, they ran like a seam. So this is another example of false suite. Now the poet says there is another near relation of the anagrams and acrostics, which is commonly called a chronogram. The chronogram, chronogram, the chronogram is also an example of false suite. What is this chronogram? This kind of wheat appears very often on modern medals, especially those of Germany. This is very famous in Germany. It appears in medals which are given to awarded to people, awarded to athletes when they become winners. When they represent these German people, they represent in the inscription the year in which they were coined. So instead of directly writing 2000, suppose the games were held in 2022. So instead of writing 2022, they would write a number of letters, and if you select some letters from there, individual letters, you would be able to know that these games were held in the year 2022. He gives an example. We see on a medal of Gustavus Adolphus time following words: CHRI, I is a little bigger, STV, bigger one, V is bigger, S, DUX, X is bigger, ERGO, then TRIVM, these three are bigger, PH, then VS. Now from this, if you take the pens to pick the figures out of the several words, and if you range them, you take these special words which are bigger, and then you put them somewhere, and this amounts to MDCX VVVII or 1627. This means 1627. That was the year when the medals were stamped. That was the year when the games were played. So anagram is one example of false rhyme. Acrostic is another example of false rhyme. And the third one is chronogram. If a question comes, what are the different examples of false suites? You have to write anagram is an example of false rhyme and explain what is an anagram, give an example. Then you write what is an acrostic, give an example. Then what is a chronogram, give an example. Next he says Bouts rhymes, Boutsrimes, Bouts rhymes. They were the favorites of the French people. Bouts rhymes, they were the example of false suites, and they were the favorites of the French people. And that at a time when it abounded in wit and learning. So when there was the writer says, I am surprised. When the French nation was very rich in wit and learning, they were fascinated by these Bouts rhymes. What are Bouts rhymes? List of words that rhymes. List of words that rhymes. They were a list of words that rhyme to one another. Frog, dong, go sound. Right? Play, slay. Play, slay, a. So they produce similar sounds. These are rhyming words. So they were a list of words that rhyme to one another, drawn up by another hand. Suppose I am a poet, I will not be writing those words. somebody else will give me a list of rhyming words. Now, he would say, Sir, I give you a list of 8 or 10 or 12 or 14 rhyming words. Those rhyming words will be there at the end of the lines. Accordingly, you write your poems. Accordingly, you write the first part of the poems so that these rhyming words are there at the end of the lines. So they were a list of words that rhyme to one another, drawn up by another hand and given to a poet who was to make a poem to the rhymes in the same order that they were placed upon the list. List re jiye jemiti jouthi say first re suppose frog lekha heichi, you have to write a line that ends in frog. तापर स्लग लिखाई यू हैव टू राइट अनदर लाइन दैट एंड्स इन स्लग तो एभली भाव से गोटे लिस्ट करके तुमको धरे देबे दैट दिस इज अ लिस्ट ऑफ 10 12 और 14 और 18 so no it didn't have any the poem didn't have any fixed length so तुमको धरे देले and according to the list you have to write a poem and तुमको सही भले सजे के लिखिबा पड़िबो now the more uncommon the rhymes were the more extraordinary was the genius of the poet that could accommodate his verses to them. So obviously, जदि uncommon ହେଇଗଲା का से rhyming words गुड़ाक, the poet must be having an extraordinary ability. एटा कौनसी साधारण poet पाखरे ए कामटा हे परिबोनी जी कि end word को rhyming word को match करके गोटे poem लिखिबो lines लिखिबो आ poem टे जेतेबेले तमे लिखिबो तमे तो प्रति लाइन रो मीनिंग डिफरेंट होतो बा सब्जेक्ट मैटर डिफर करतुबो समित हे परिबोनी so you know that is what the writer says. Writer gives an example for the month of November last, which now lies before me, is as follows. Somewhere he finds these rhyming words. Somebody had given another poet a list of rhyming words: lauriers, guriers, moshet, lisent, scissors, attenders, hollet, follet. So these were the rhyming words which were handed over to the poet, and basing on these rhyming words, the poet had to write a poem. Then he gives example of this is an example of Baude's rhymes, and he says these were the kind of tasks which French ladies used to give to their lovers. ठीक अच्छी गोटे फ्रेंच लेडी तमे यू लव समबडी ताको दौछ जे बाबू तमे या ऊपर जदी पोएम करके आसीबो आई विल बी इन ए स्टेट टू लव यू आई विल से यस आई विल रेस्पोंड विथ ए यस हां सी गोटे आनी की देला आउ गोटे ग्रेट राइटर ग्रेट पोएट ऑफ द पीरियड व्हेन ही राइट्स this he accepts this type of jobs then this doesn't speak very well about the status of the literature of the period. So next he talks about double rhymes. Double rhymes are also examples of false wit according to Addison. Double rhymes, my dear friends, they are also called feminine rhymes. F-E-M-I-N-I-N-E, feminine rhyme. This kind of rhyme occurs within the words that have the same beginning and the same ending. Double rhyme re rhyme ta thore habani. Usually we find rhyme end rhymes. Usually the last words given at the end rhyme. Kintu ethi for example tame measles and weasels. Ei dita jetebele nabo mere where mere measles weasels तो एलियस राइम कला एपटे मी व दिस राइम्स एटा गोटे डबल राइम बोली ताको कहा जाए ये जो डबल राइम्स व्हिच वर ए पार्ट ऑफ डॉगरेल पोएट्री यू कैन राइट डॉगरेल पोएट्री this was a technical term for bad poetry and poetry which didn't have a standard, and so this was characterized by irregular words, forced rhyme, जबरदस्ती rhyme ताकू करिया पे doggerel poetry बोली कहती, This is poetry that is not of a very high standard and high value. So ଏଇଟାକୁ ଆମେ doggerel poetry ବୋଲି କହିବା ସେଟା. So that is also an example of false wit. So କିନ୍ତୁ କେତେ ଗୁଡେ କଥା ଆମ ଏଇଠି ଏଇ ଚାପ୍ଟରରେ ଆମେ ଶିଖିଲେ ଯୋଉଟାକୁ ସେ which addition brands as or classifies as false wit. ତେଣୁ ପ୍ରଥମେ କଣ କହୁଛନ୍ତି? He says anagrams are examples of false wit. Acrostics are examples of false wit. Bouts rhymes are examples of false wits. Chronograms are examples of false wit. Double rhyme or feminine rhyme, they are also examples of false wit. And doggerel poetry, these are also examples of false wits. So this is what we learn from this particular chapter. Thank you very much. I hope this helps you. Thank you.